What do good monarchs do with bad enemies? Can a person or persons that have committed terrible crimes be reformed, even forgiven? Are the only options when dealing with such individuals murder or mercy? Those are some of the ideas I want to go over in this video. There is no business for this discussion. My Patreon is paused for the month due to lack of content. I'll explain why at the end. So to talk about good monarchs, I must needs share with you all a clip from an interview with George R.R. Martin that he did during a visit to Staten Island for a Game of Thrones theme night at the borough's Richmond County Bank. In the interview, Martin discusses Tolkien and Lord of the Rings, in particular the character Aragorn, later named King Elessar. Martin talks about what Elessar's rule might have looked like. Famously, he wonders what his tax policy was. But then he also talks about the Orcs and how they might have been dealt with following the War of the Ring. Here is the quote.
You look at Tolkien and Sauron has been defeated, Aragorn is king, and Tolkien just says that he ruled wisely and well for 500 years or whatever. But then you start asking yourself, what does that constitute, ruling wisely and well? I mean, what was his tax policy? The Orcs, there are still tens, thousands of orcs left over at the end of Lord of the Rings. Did he pursue a policy of genocide toward them? Or did he reach out to try to educate the orcs and bring them into the mainstream and civilize them? We never get answers to any of these questions. We just get, he rules wisely and well.
What did King Elessar do with all the remaining orcs? It seems to be one of those thought experiments nerds and geeks bring to their symposiums when it's time to philosophize on matters in media that no one else would even consider. Like, was Luke Skywalker a mass murderer for blowing up the Death Star? There might have been innocent engineers and janitors working there. Members of the lower class with families, hopes, and dreams. They only took the job on the Death Star because it paid well, had benefits, and a good retirement plan. There aren't that many jobs in the evil empire that aren't related to the evil empire. Let's debate this in the free marketplace of ideas. Having characters face serious consequences for their actions is what it means to add realism to a story. Some people believe adding realism simply means a heightened sense of violence and characters dying. The real world is brutal, sure, but the brutality and heightened violence in a story is only realistic if there are consequences afterward. For example, countries might band together to create legal documents to deal with the rise of masked vigilante superheroes getting into violent conflicts, some of them catastrophic, in events all over the globe. And if one or more of them decide to defy those legal documents, well,
there will be consequences.
We're talking Civil War. This is worth mentioning because it ties into Martin's question. Martin wants a realistic approach to King Elessar's rule. We don't know what King Aragorn Elessar did with the orcs because Tolkien never told us. Martin considers this a flaw in his writing. And if Tolkien did explain what happened to his orcs, then Martin just doesn't know. But the point is, it's not enough for him that Tolkien wrote the king ruled wisely and justly. That's not very realistic. Martin needs to know the details of his rule. In particular, how did a good king deal with bad enemies? Enemies such as the orcs of Middle-earth. There were a lot of orcs left after the fall of Sauron. What did King Elessar do with them? Did he try to reform them? Is reformation even possible? Or did the king choose genocide? One stage in the genocidal process is dehumanization of the target group. Dehumanization being the act of stripping a person or group of people of the qualities that make them human, speaking of them in degrading ways as if they were animals. For example, calling a person and his allies the usurper and the usurper's dogs. It's easier to kill a man like a dog if you never viewed him as a man to begin with. Except orcs are not human. King Elessar does not have to declare to his people that the orcs are not like us because they aren't. He wouldn't have to label them as animals or beasts because they are already so very different from humans. In fact, the king doesn't have to go through all the stages of genocide. He could jump straight to extermination. The orcs fought for the big bad evil guy. They pillaged and they plundered. One might say they deserve to die. But is orc genocide the answer? The way Martin poses the question, the fact that he raises the question at all, makes me think Martin's answer is no. Orc genocide is not the answer. That would require hunting them all down, killing the men, the women, and their children, slaughtering orc babies in their cradles. That will be documented in King Elisar's rule, and good kings don't commit genocide. This interview and the question of what a good monarch does with bad enemies immediately made me think of Daenerys Targaryen. Dany has become Queen of Meereen, and she has a problem with some truly despicable enemies as well, the slavers of Slaver's Bay. These aren't orcs, these are humans, but they are humans that dehumanize others. They mutilate little boys by the thousands. They train little girls in the art of pleasuring old men. They treat men like beasts. What does a good queen do with enemies such as these? Is reform possible? Is forgiveness an option? Or is it only burn them all? Genocide. They are indeed slavers. We have heard the horrors they have committed in their plazas of pain and punishment, but to do to them what they have done to others is not sufficient in solving the problem of slavery. So what should Dany do in the long run? Make slavery illegal and then issue a fine or a stern warning to those who have committed it? That might not feel satisfactory for some readers. The common answer is, kill them all. They are slavers, they deserve to die. This is the only morally correct answer, and any hesitation or opposition is pro-slavery. I find this to be an incredibly dishonest way of arguing and also extremely anti-intellectual. Dishonest because it presents not supporting the mass murder of slavers as support of slavery. If a person agrees slavery should be abolished in the series but does not approve of retaliation against the masters, that can't be framed as them being pro-slavery. Anti-intellectual because kill them all requires no actual thought, and Martin clearly wants us to think, what does a good monarch do with objectively bad enemies? I believe he wants us to consider this because what the monarch does with their enemies says more about them than it does about their enemies. I think the slavers of Slaver's Bay are written as diabolical as they are on purpose. There's a reason why they eat unborn puppies. There's a reason why they have fighting pits where children are sometimes covered in blood and honey and fed to bears. It's so the reader starts dehumanizing them. It's so the reader wants for them to be killed. And when it happens, the reader feels a sense of satisfaction. They got what they deserved, and they deserve to die. But this is a trap. When Daenerys thinks back on the deaths of the 163 masters that she killed for the deaths of the 163 enslaved children, she thinks they deserved it. Who determines that? There is no divine power in the world of Ice and Fire. There is no unseen force that determines who deserves what and what the proportionate punishment should be for a perceived crime. Often, when the characters blame or thank the gods had nothing to do with anything. People did. It's people that determine who deserves what. People in power. For example, when Mirri Maz Duur tells Dany that Drogo will surely die, Dany thinks, what had she done to make the gods so cruel? Was it the gods that were cruel or Mirri Maz Duur? And the only thing Dany did was put her trust in Mirri Maz Duur, inviting her into her inner circle where Mirri wreaked irrevocable harm. And if you asked Mirri, no doubt she thought Dany deserved what she did to her, her husband, and her unborn baby. Martin wants readers to fall into the trap of thinking certain people deserve what they have coming to them. He wants readers to thirst for what amounts to revenge and not justice. One way he does this is by having characters react to something truly horrible that they have just encountered. Daenerys hearing Krasny's Monaklos describe the brutal process an Unsullied soldier goes through before they get their spiked cap is the same plot device as Arya hearing Chiswick tell the story about what the Mountain did at that alehouse, how the Mountain and his men assaulted a young girl and killed her brother for jumping up to defend her. The story enrages Arya and no doubt the reader as well. It enrages her into using one of her wishes to kill Chiswick. It causes her to be very irrational. Arya has him killed and she feels satisfaction. He got what he deserved. She does this twice more. It's only later her rationality kicks in and she realized she wasted her wishes. Daenerys hears about the boys, their mutilation, their puppies, and the babies they are forced to murder. Arstan Whitebeard taps his staff. Krasny speaks of the process with the same casual cruelty as Chiswick. He even makes jokes. Just like Chiswick, when Daenerys attacks Astapor, there is a sense of relief, catharsis. They got what they deserved. It's not slavery being morally reprehensible that caused Daenerys to act. It was specifically the story of the Unsullied. It is often said Daenerys is anti-slavery, but she allows people to sell themselves into slavery. It would be more appropriate to say Daenerys is pro-freedom of choice. The Unsullied had no choice. They were stolen, enslaved, mutilated. This angered Daenerys personally, which led to the sacking of the city. It's an irrational response, an emotional response, one cloaked in moral necessity. Daenerys had been comfortable with slavery up until now. Even after freeing her slaves, she was comfortable with slavery in Xaro's huge mansion. Daenerys freeing the Unsullied and the other slaves of the city is the morally right thing to do if one opposes slavery and has the power to stand against it. But she wasn't inspired to do it for them because she believes slavery is morally wrong. She came to buy slaves, remember. She was inspired because of how much it upset her. These boys had their freedom of choice taken away. They were brutalized. They had no freedom, and so she restored it. If you want to suggest what does it matter as long as she came around and opposed the slavers, it's because she's a fictional character and analyzing her motives and looking for trends is important. It's not until Dany is in Meereen that she realizes her mistakes in Astapor, how her decisions were irrational and led to the proclamation of a Butcher King. Dany again takes personal offense when she arrives in Meereen. She executes the 163 masters, and again, there's relief in that, catharsis. They got what they deserved. The anger she felt made her feel like an avenging dragon. But this was not appropriate. There was no attempt at determining who gave the order to kill the children. She killed the masters as they killed the children, which was revenge, not justice. Revenge only fulfills a sense of personal satisfaction. And that does not last long, because later Daenerys reflects and her thoughts on what she'd witnessed in the plaza makes her frown. Even if you argue all the slavers are guilty because they are slavers, that only means Dany let some guilty people walk away. That was not justice. Well, they were guilty of something is a rather careless approach to the matter. It's tantamount to shooting an arrow and painting a bullseye around it after. People should be punished according to the crime they are accused of. They did something is the excuse you get from a leader and their supporters who did not do their due diligence. In fact, collective punishment is prohibited by the Geneva Conventions. I understand such laws don't exist in this world of ice and fire, but I only bring it up to demonstrate just how problematic the idea is. It has come to be regarded as a war crime. There is an expectation that, even in Westeros, alleged criminals are treated fairly. What do you do with enemies such as these? Not this, because one can get comfortable using the excuse, well, they did something. They were no angel. Use it with the slavers. What's to stop Daenerys from using it when dealing with a troublesome vassal? On the show, Barristan tries to convince Dany not to execute the masters in the method that she does, but she doesn't listen.
This city is yours. All these people are your subjects now. Sometimes it is better to answer injustice with mercy.
I will answer injustice with justice.
Barristan does not do this in the books. The show included this as a much more blatant warning to the audience against supporting such brutality. She might have had a cool motive, but it's still murder, even when dealing with enemies such as slavers. It's again demonstrated in a scene with Jorah and Dany when they learned of the slavers reinstituting slavery in Astapor and Yunkai.
Herding the masters into pens and slaughtering them by the thousands is also treating men like beasts. The slaves you free, brutality is all they've ever known. You want them to know something else. You'll have to show it to them. It's tempting to see your enemies as evil, all of them. But there's good and evil on both sides in every war. I wouldn't be here to help you if Ned Stark had done to me what you want to do to the masters of Yunkai.
It might feel good, it might seem fitting, but unquestionably brutalizing the enemy is dangerous. If Dany wants to be the light of a new world, she can't go around committing the dark practices of the old one. Believing that there is no punishment that is unacceptable for objectively bad people means the condoning of certain heinous actions. For example, when Dany holds court following the sack of Meereen, a young boy in a tattered tokar presents himself. He tells her 2 slaves that belong to his family killed his father, his brother, raped his mother, and killed her too. They slashed the boy's face, but let him live. One of them still lives in the boy's house. The other now serves in Dany's army. Dany refuses the boy's request to punish the men because she pardoned all crimes committed during the sack of Meereen, which means a rapist now serves in Dany's army. If you think slavers get what they deserve, and that they deserve suffering before death, look at what happened to the boy and his family. Daenerys hears word from Astapor that the former slaves have become the new slave masters, and the former masters are their slaves. This might seem fitting and appropriate, but the children of the masters have been taken, mutilated, and are now being made into new Unsullied. What does Daenerys do in this case? The anti-intellectual approach would have Dany ride or fly to Astapor, kill the new masters, and free the slaves again. She'd be killing people she once freed, but they're slavers now, so they deserve to die. She'd also be helping the people she once despised. Or should she have them killed? Or should she just kill everyone but the children? The situation is much more complex and much more dire than burn, kill, destroy.
I will crucify the masters. I will set their fleets afire, kill every last one of their soldiers, and return their cities to the dirt. That is my plan.
This is a line from the show, Just So, but it seems to be what some people believe Daenerys Targaryen should do. And it sounds good until you realize the slave masters fight with armies of slaves. Think of the Clinker Lords, whose soldiers are chained together so they can't run away when they face Dany's armies and her dragons. They don't have the option of throwing down their weapons and fleeing rather than fighting. They are forced to fight. Destroying the cities, reducing them to the dirt, leaves the slaves with no infrastructure. They don't start from zero, they start from -1. It's a plan based on pure emotion and no rational thought. It means harming innocent people as well as those deemed guilty. But what does a good monarch do with enemies such as these? You can ban slavery, but what of the former masters? Genocide seems out of the question. Good monarchs don't do genocide. It appears there is no single solitary answer. Gentle viewers, after reading this series many times and analyzing it with a sharp lens, I have come to a profound realization that I want to share with you all. You won't hear this from anyone else, so listen up. I have determined that ruling, being a monarch, having a position of absolute power, it's like really, really hard and stuff. Would you believe that? The crown, it weighs heavy. A man named Shakespeare once wrote that. One must learn when to compromise with an enemy. If they are willing to bend the knee and cooperate, mercy might be the preferable option to murder, even if the person is truly reprehensible. Sometimes you have to sit across from someone you would rather see dead and dine with them. Sometimes the words of your house aren't fire and blood. Sometimes your house words are gonna be grin and bear it. Ruling is easier when a person is familiar with the region they intend to rule. The people, the language, the layout, the history, the culture, the lineages of those who currently rule. So you know the difference between Lorak and Kandak, between Zach and Merak. This would go a long way from preventing some future frustrations. If you don't, you might find yourself with thoughts like, Daenerys was sick unto death of Zach and Merak. She was sick of all the Meereenese, great and small alike. Because your unplanned rule is not going to go well. And if Dany is sick of all the people in the city, then perhaps encouraging her to engage in brutal acts might be unwise. It seems the question of what should Dany do with enemies such as these can quickly extend to all of the Meereenese if she's become sick of them. And make no mistake, if Daenerys kills a bunch of slave masters, there will be consequences for her character. The story would lack realism otherwise, and Martin is very concerned with realism. Killing a bunch of slave masters might give some readers a sense of relief, catharsis, they got what they deserved, but how she deals with her enemies now is how she deals with them later. If burn, kill, destroy worked so well in Essos, why not in Westeros? We started this with a question posed about a Lord of the Rings character. Let's end with a quote from another character from the same series. When Gandalf and Frodo are talking about Gollum and what should have been done with him, Gandalf offers a bit of wisdom. "But this is terrible," cried Frodo, "far worse than the worst that I imagined from your hints and warnings. Oh Gandalf, best of friends, what am I to do? For now I am really afraid. What am I to do? What a pity that Bilbo did not stab that vile creature when he had the chance." Pity? It was pity that stayed his hand. Pity and mercy, not to strike without need. And he has been well rewarded, Frodo. Be sure he took so little hurt from the evil and escaped in the end, because he began his ownership of the ring so, with pity. "I'm sorry," said Frodo, "but I am frightened, and I do not feel any pity for Gollum." "You have not seen him," Gandalf broke in. "No, and I don't want to," said Frodo. "I can't understand you. Do you mean to say that you and the elves have let him live on after all those horrible deeds? Now, at any rate, he is as bad as any orc and just an enemy. He deserves death." "Deserves it? I dare say he does. Many that live deserve death, and some that die deserve life. Can you give it to them? Then do not be too eager to deal out death in judgment, for even the very wise cannot see all ends. Now, before I close out this video, I want to give a quick update on the channel. The reason I haven't been posting videos lately is because I have been in the process of selling my old recording setup and buying a new one. Can't make content if I can't record. Now that I have a new mic and all that other stuff that goes with it, we can get back to business as usual. While I was away, I wasn't inactive. I was writing like a madman. Dozens of pages have been written for new theories, new ideas. I don't talk about future projects unless they are done or damn near close to being done, because I firmly believe in the idea that if you talk about doing something, it increases the chance of you not actually doing it. Remember when I said I had a video idea called 7-book series to read while you wait for the Winds of Winter in the works? I promised that video over a year ago, and it's still not done. My bad. So while I can't tell you what's coming next, there are videos coming. This video was basically a remake of a video discussion I did exclusive for patrons and channel members. It's a more serious take on that video, which was much more irreverent, me riffing, having more fun with the material. Speaking of Patreon, thanks to the following members, including Philip E. Due to the lack of content recently, I have paused memberships for the month of January, but they should be open again in February if you happen to be interested. That's why there's no business section at the opening of the video. Business is closed, but that doesn't stop you from liking, subscribing, and ringing that bell. Thank you all for watching, and until next time.